Hello everyone, Miss Carrie here from Miss Carrie's Creations. Today I'm sharing 2 card projects that you can create using items from the Not Too Shabby January box of the month. These are really quick cards that you can make to give family and friends, and I can't wait to share them with you. If you missed my previous project, let me share real quick what comes in this collection. You will receive 2 paper pads, Somebody Loves Me and Best Friends. Both of these are 6x6 double-sided patterns. There are also 2 packages of ephemera, which match the pattern papers, and 3 stamp sets. Today I'm going to be creating some Valentine cards using strips of pattern paper from the Somebody Loves Me paper pad. And I'll be using a few sentiments from the stamp sets that come with that box of the month. I'm going to start by cutting up some pattern paper strips. You can cut these to any size that you like. If you want them to span the width of the card, you will need to make these 4 1/4 inches wide. If you want to create a little frame or have another pattern piece behind the strips, you will need to cut them just a little bit smaller. As I create each of the cards today, I will list the measurements of my paper strips for each card, just in case you wish to recreate them as shown. I'm also going to share some fun ways to amp up these strips of paper using stencils and decorative borders. For this first card, I have 3 pattern paper strips. Before I attach these to my card base, I want to use a stencil to add a little bit of texture to that top pattern strip. I have placed this down onto a magnetic board, and I'm using a stencil with some paste to add a few little polka dots. This is a honeybee stamp stencil that I have in my collection, but I know that you probably have something in your stash that you could use with dots or florals, hearts, or stripes. Now, if you're not a fan of texture paste, you could also use some ink for this application. After the paste had dried, I started attaching the pattern paper strips to a piece of craft cardstock. Off to the side there, I have listed the measurements for each of these strips for your reference. On that second pattern paper strip, I wrapped a little bit of ribbon around it before I attached it to the card. I did cut it a little bit wider than needed so that I was able to attach the ribbon to the back. Once all of my pattern paper strips were laid down onto that craft cardstock, I used my sewing machine to add some stitching, and then I attached this to a card base. I have stamped the phrase Valentine's Day onto a piece of cardstock using one of the stamps in the box of the month. I backed this with some pattern paper to help it stand out. I did have a difficult time deciding which one of the die cuts I wanted to use on this card. This little bunny cupid with the balloon is just too cute, but I think it's a little bit big for this design, and I want to try it on a horizontal card. I honestly loved that lazy bunny on top of the sentiment, looking at the little heart, but I knew that I would be using a bunny on the second card, so I opted for a floral die cut instead. I'll probably create a few more cards just so that I can use some of these bunnies to create some Valentines. I layered the floral piece I selected behind the sentiment and trimmed it to size, and then I attached it to the card on some foam tape. I also added a little ribbon bow to the card and attached it with a glue dot. This card came together rather quickly, so let's go ahead and make a second pattern paper strip card. For this card, I've created a frame for my pattern paper strips from a 4-inch by 5 1/4 inch piece of pattern paper. My pattern paper strips are going to be cut at 3 3/4 inches wide, and one of them has been cut using a border die. You can use any die in your collection, or cut a border with your cutting machine if you like. Before I attach all of these in place, I want to stamp my sentiment onto the cloud pattern paper. That white cloud in the background is the perfect spot for the sentiment. I'm going to go ahead and place this down onto a stamping platform, line up my stamp, and then I'm going to stamp that sentiment right there on top of the little cloud image. Now I'm going to be able to add all of those pattern paper strips to the frame. As I do this, I will list those measurements off to the side for you so that you can refer to them as you create your own cards. When I was cutting the paper strips for both cards, I was very careful to pay attention to the patterns on those papers. The ones with simple patterns like hearts are easy to cut down, but the bunnies and the trees required a little bit of forethought. I didn't want to cut off any bunny heads, and I wanted to make sure that the trees looked evenly spaced on that bottom strip. I also paid attention to the direction of the lines on the patterns. Paying attention to your patterns on your paper before cutting helps create a nice balanced background on your project. Before I attach this down to a card base, I am going to add a little bit of stitching with my sewing machine, but you are always welcome to skip that part. In the lower left corner, I'm going to add a little bit of ephemera, and I'm going to attach this with some foam tape so that I can add some dimension to this card. All right, now that our second card is complete, let's go ahead and take a look at the two designs created today. Both of these are super simple and easy to make using pattern paper strips. I chose to use ones from the Some Bunny Loves You collection, but you could use patterns from the Best Friend paper pad for these types of cards. You could use any of the elements or sentiments that come in the box of the month to match the occasion that you're creating for, but I thought that this would be a fun set to use for some Valentine cards. There are so many possibilities with this box of the month collection. Adding texture paste to your cards is a great way to amp up that pattern paper and give your cards some fun dimension. Again, if you are not a fan of texture paste, you can always skip that part of the design. Now, if you're one who enjoys pinning projects to inspiration boards, I have added photos of these two cards on my website and in the Not Too Shabby Friends group. I want to thank you for joining me today as I created these two Valentine cards. I hope this project inspired you to try something new. If you have any questions about this project or the supplies I listed below, feel free to leave me a comment. I hope that you have a wonderful week, and I can't wait to see what you create.